Hello, Charlie.
Hey, Endo, how's it going? We're on air.
We're on air. We're live.
Oh, yeah, straight away, no messing.
Right away. There's no messing around.
Good
Right
stuff.
to the source of that. Yeah.
Great.
So we've just gone live. I think we're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. So just a very quick intro. So welcome to this thing that I called the Walk the Talk. This is episode 3. It's the Bitcoin only podcast where we walk our way through the ideas, people, and places, and we're shaping the Bitcoin world. Basically, I'm your host. I'm Endo. I run the Bitcoin Walk, and today my guest is someone I didn't have to go looking for. We literally crossed our paths on the last meetup in Madeira, and also on the Bitcoin Walk in Ashada Grande, which was amazing last Saturday. Charlie Stevens. Charlie, do you want to give us a quick intro of yourself?
Endo, well, first of all, I just wanted to say what a pleasure it is to be on Walk the Talk. I love the name and I love the concept as well to be streaming on on X and on
YouTube.
YouTube as well. Brilliant. Okay. So
We're gonna
whoever's
get we're
watching,
gonna get to we're gonna get to Nostra as well. I'm just testing still the platform Restream. I'm using the free tier. If I'm happy with that, then we'll be on the Nostra land as well.
lovely. Okay, well, yeah, it's great to be here. It's great to be in Madeira. It's such an absolute stunning island. I haven't gotten used to the the relief, the land, the views. Yeah, I'm still gobsmacked every single day.
How long
So
has it been since you arrived?
it's been just over a week. We arrived on a Monday night, last Monday night. So uh last week. Yeah,
So, I,
would have
so
been
you're fairly fresh to Madeira, and I want to kind of pop the question because that's what happened to me.
Mm,
The first few weeks, maybe months, actually until today, I feel like I'm living in a Disney cartoon. Like everything is beautiful. Conversations and interactions with people are great. What's your experience over this week?
it's been mind blowing. It's a combination of things. I've come over with my partner here, and she also has roots in Madeira, so we've gotten to spend a lot of time with family here, and that's been a really joyous experience. We've gotten to meet the Bitcoin community in Madeira, which is spectacular. It's even though the meetup that we had, there was only maybe 10 of us there, it felt like that there was a much bigger community surrounding those 10 people as well. So that was very encouraging as a Bitcoiner who's looking for a place where Bitcoiners tend to concentrating. Madeira seems to be a really, really good hotspot for that. So that's been very encouraging. I've even met some friends from El Salvador who've been here, who are here for, let's say, a week. Met up with them, and even a friend has just come over there yesterday. So we've been going to the beach. Oh, look, I was talking to my partner there yesterday, and we just had a swim, and it was just, you're looking around, you're looking at the mountains, the fresh air, the temperature is perfect, and you're working from here as well. So you're earning more than you're spending, but you're living in what I feel like is a paradise. So it's
Is that
it's
is that is that a hack? Is that like do you feel like we've hacked it a little bit? Like we found a spot.
yeah,
Is
it's like,
this the
what's the catch?
paradise? Yeah,
Is
yeah,
there a
yeah.
catch? Is there a catch? But no, it's just an island off in the middle of the Atlantic that attracts some good people, and the quality of food is really good. The
Yeah.
ability to live a healthy lifestyle is very easy. So I'm really grateful for that.
Madeira
And
is
yeah,
Madeira is great, but I wanted to give a little bit of context because you just moved from, is it 3 years that you spent in El Salvador?
yeah, 3 years. So moved over there in mid 2023.
Right. Okay. Well, that's I think in Europe, yes, probably Madeira is the Bitcoin place, the Bitcoin island, like the with the most Bitcoin adoption, you could say, compared to
In
the rest
Europe.
of Europe. Yes. And I wanted to kind of go around the globe and pick your brains on what's it like in America, what's it like in El Salvador specifically, what's it like for the average Jose or Jose, who is basically just living in El Salvador, and all of a sudden his country becomes this Bitcoin country. Like, how has life changed for average people in El Salvador?
Well, I'm sure Jose is much better able to answer for that rather than someone who came over and is seeing from secondhand. But from my perspective, I believe that it was a complete 180 from being in a country that was ravaged by gangs, previously by civil war, then by gangs, and then to all of a sudden have security. I'm sure that was a huge turning point, and that's the major shift that the average Jose probably feels, is the ability to move outside of their own town, around the country without having to fear of going into the wrong place and um, being killed. That's probably the most significant shift, and then obviously the increase in tourism, and then also the increase of expats coming and living in El Salvador, and a big proportion of them being Bitcoiners. So now you brought in Bitcoin into the country, and there is a huge amount of people who actually have a Lightning wallet and are familiar that they can use Bitcoin. And it's seen much more as money and as a form of payment in El Salvador than I think in any other country, because that wallet was normalized. So that's a huge plus for when a state decides, let's put Bitcoin in nationwide. The Bitcoin ATMs are really handy if you wanted to cash out with your Bitcoin. Very, very easy, 0% commission.
Charlie, I wanted to relay back to the security aspect of of El Salvador, because it was infamous for very high crime rates and gangs and murders and kidnappings, whatever. And it feels like you had like this had to be like, I see some analogy between fix the money and fix the world. Like, you have to fix the ground layer, and in terms of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need to be able to provide security for your people to develop, to grow, to innovate, to educate, to do anything, right?
Right.
And I feel that El Salvador, and the name in Spanish, the savior, it's like so iconic that this is the name of the country as well, has gone through this from being one of the most dangerous places in the world to becoming probably on the one of the safest ones right now. So I wonder if there is a message in that, and if we zoom out, we just basically see, okay, to attract good people, to attract investors, to attract capital, you need to provide not only the infrastructure, the education system, healthcare system, roads, etc., but first and foremost, you need to make sure that people don't get killed or robbed, or people are safe, and they feel confident starting anything up.
Absolutely. I think it all comes down to property rights, really, and your first form of property is your own body, as John Locke would have said in the 18th century. So for you to be able to not be inflicted upon by others, and for your ability to have autonomy over your own body, someone taking that from you by hurting you, is the primary thing. You do not want to have to be scared that if you earn money or if you start a business, that you will not be coerced to have to give away your money. And that was a huge way the gangs worked, was that if any business was earning anything, they would send someone there to then collect renta, which is their rent, and they would charge really high fees no matter what the rent, that no matter what the earnings were, and that really disincentivized business to occur. And it really would disincentivize any businesses from setting up there because of the difficulties of transporting goods, of providing services across the country. And it doesn't allow for people to build up any sort of wealth. And if you don't have that buildup of wealth, you're not incentivizing business. You're not incentivizing others to sell there, and it just things stagnate. And there's a lack of development. People don't see the purpose of educating themselves because there's nothing to aspire to. And now we've gotten to a stage where your young Salvadoran can aspire to something much more, and they can see the light, they can see the space where they can develop. They've got, they're increasing their education by facilitating quality education curriculums within school and university, and then new and more specialized jobs are being offered within the nation. But also they have the ability to go outside of El Salvador now more, and they have that confidence to then push their skills abroad and serve other corporations, or even start their own corporation and sell to clients outside of El Salvador. So that, I think it's a self-esteem thing as well, Endo, I think it's believing in you, in your country, in your population, and that you have the ability to compete worldwide.
That is beautiful, and I think what we're gonna get to is the beautiful domain of one of the OGs, hope.com. Like, they have hope. I think they've got reasons to have hope now, and they can actually, as you say, work hard because they know that they can get to something that pays off. That they are disillusioned that someone will take it away from them. And like, we're talking about El Salvador here, but the rent seekers are everywhere. Like, in Europe, you're gonna have to share your, like, give away 30, 40, 50% of what you make to the rent seekers that wear the government label, right? And sometimes you got another ways of insurance that needs to be paid for you to do your
Yeah,
business. So,
that's a great point, Endo. And I think in El Salvador, you don't feel like that there's that many rent seekers anymore, that you can do business without having to be looking over your shoulder, knowing if you're paying out off the right person or the right state. And if anybody's interested in starting business, I really suggest that you check El Salvador out and see how it looks like as a climate, because it's good. Obviously, there's pros and cons to El Salvador compared to other countries, and the fact that it's coming from a stage where it was under a lot of terror, let's just say, and there wasn't much development there for quite a while. It's starting from a place that requires organization, order within each individual across the country, and a maturing, I find, with regards to infrastructure and general business sense, etc. So it's very ripe for anybody who wants to bring their skills there and apply it, and earn a good living and understand the culture, because they're really, really sound people, I'd say, really
okay.
kind, generous people.
And tell me, Charlie, obviously, Bitcoin adoption in El Salvador is pretty much going well, but I think it's been very much inspired by Max and Stacy, and maybe more people who came to El Salvador as sought it as a refuge. How is it, among the people who are actually from El Salvador? Is Bitcoin embraced by El Salvadorians? Do you have like local leaders who are, taking up this initiative and preaching to their community, or is that still? I guess what I'm trying to ask is that being adopted, or like from ground up in the local communities, or is that still a struggle? Because in Madeira, like Bitcoiners in Madeira are um, they're great, and there's a lot of us here, and we've onboarded a bunch of businesses, shops, restaurants, whatnot. But it feels to me that the adoption among people from Madeira, locals, is not as optimistic as we would like it to be. What's it like in Salvador? Do you see any similarities or differences here?
So just as a context, Max and Stacy were very good for marketing El Salvador specifically as Bitcoin country, and got a lot of Bitcoiners over there. A lot of people were disillusioned with the amount of Bitcoin adoption in El Salvador in general and left the country. A lot of people were expecting it to be at a certain stage of acceptance or for people to be aware of it, and they were, they didn't feel like it was at the stage where they thought it would be. El Salvador is a place for you to go and build, not for you to go and then just live your life.
Yeah.
I don't believe that that's the case. You need to be ready to take on the challenges, and sometimes the marketing may make it seem a bit more polished than it actually is and
Of course.
more refined than El Salvador is. So yeah, if you go to the ground, most people, like if you talk to your average Joe, don't use Bitcoin day to day. And probably most businesses don't accept Bitcoin realistically. Okay, so it's generally concentrated around hotspots, and they have, people have Lightning wallets, but businesses, because the flow of Bitcoin isn't that high, let's say US dollars by far more predominant, the businesses don't see the reason as to why they would maintain Bitcoin as a form of payment. But you can major stores, you can purchase your goods and services with Bitcoin, and then
Charlie, sorry to jump in. I wanted to check, like, is there like, what's the acceptance of payment cards, like, Visa, Mastercard? Is that something that is popular, or is it cash predominantly?
cash predominantly across the country, but now in San Salvador, then you can use card pretty much
Yeah.
everywhere. And then obviously places that are more touristy or even in towns now, banks are becoming much more popularized. There's a lot of payment companies that are focusing in on El Salvador and trying to popularize their bank app or their payment app within them, but that fiat rails, as well as you've got a lot of Bitcoin companies that are trying to compete in terms of payment. So yeah, it would be predominantly cash. So in Berlin, where I was in a small town, which I was living in for 2 years, and it was a great experience to see Bitcoin flourish in a place that was predominantly cash driven. You saw that people went directly from cash to then a digital payment, but that was native to Bitcoin. So they could use Lightning and they could use US stable coins as well. So your average merchant could accept Bitcoin and then hold it in US pegged dollars so that they don't have to deal with the volatility. And they could then save in Bitcoin whenever they needed to, and they'd be exposed to what Bitcoin was. Well, there was a Bitcoin center that was created in order for anyone that had any queries could go and join. And every Monday morning there was a meeting where they could learn a bit more about what Bitcoin was and the evolution of money and Austrian economics and all the basics that one has to go through in order to understand where does the value of Bitcoin come from.
And who's running those workshops? Are these the locals, or are these some people like yourself who are doing, about volunteering and helping out?
So I arrived when it was starting off, maybe a few months in, and there was 20 merchants that were already onboarded, and the two individuals that went there to target Berlin as a circular economy were present, and we grew it together. Other Bitcoiners came in and started also contributing towards it, and we went looking for a place, a center to have Bitcoin specifically. And this was a period of kind of trying out, like figuring out what will work here, and given the classes. Right now, the concentration is on the young population, so people who are just coming out of school, and then teaching them the basics of Austrian economics and all of that, and then they're now teaching others from the town. So it is locals, but they would have maybe a Bitcoiner come through and want to give a class at a point in time, and people would arrive and they'd hear Bitcoiners speak about 1971 and the gold standard, and it's a really beautiful sharing of ideas of Bitcoiners coming from all places around the world and sharing with the local population, who then would constantly be reminded of what the fiat currency is. So there's a general, a much bigger understanding in Berlin of the nature of fiat and the purpose of Bitcoin than you'd have in the rest of El Salvador and probably the rest of the world. And that's a really beautiful thing, as well as a lot of reminders of Bitcoin. You have, a lot of walls that have Bitcoin graffitied onto it.
Nice.
You have stickers all over the place, and these this concept is very important for anyone who's listening and wants to be able to proliferate Bitcoin adoption in their place. It's the visual aspect, the education, having a space where people can go and talk about Bitcoin, and then having people who understand Bitcoin deeply within that region who are dedicating themselves to spreading Bitcoin knowledge, and that's their sole purpose. And I think that we can really learn from that here in Madeira. That 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 Bitcoiners come and try and dedicate themselves to Bitcoin adoption. If you have your stack in Bitcoin and you're looking for a place to be around Bitcoiners, feel secure, live a healthy lifestyle, and you want to contribute towards Bitcoin adoption, Madeira is definitely a place that is for you. That's what I'm figuring out.
I'm not sure if you did it consciously or not, but you just advertised my friend's initiative, which is called A Place to Be. It's actually a website, aplacetobe.me, which is a Bitcoin community hub for families that want to live in freedom, away from the mainstream propaganda, away from the education, like mainstream education as well. They want to unschool their kids. There's this group of people basically who take responsibility for their children's education. They don't want their kids to be indoctrinated by the outdated system of curriculum that is not built for the times that are coming for kids. With the profession landscape and the market landscape changing literally overnight, with AI and everything that's going on, and the geopolitical unrest. The education system is just not built for that. It's not catching. It's nowhere close to be up to speed for that. So there is this initiative called A Place to Be that actually is going to be doing a barbecue on Saturday. So we'll be doing a Bitcoin walk in that area, and if you're around, maybe we'll meet them again, and
Wow.
you get to meet them.
No, that sounds brilliant. And the more people who are focused on creating these initiatives and creating these spaces for, especially for families, because that's the only way that we're going to give birth to more Bitcoiners, is that we create places where families can feel like they can bring up their kids in the place that's free from exterior harmful influences.
Yeah.
They feel like they can teach them the way, the Bitcoin standard. And yeah, I'm really really hopeful about what's coming here in Madeira, about also the connection between circular economies. So even here, and what it can learn from places like El Salvador, from other
Yeah.
circular economies, and have people move from one place to the other, share their knowledge, share their experiences. But yeah, that sounds good. A place to be.me. How do they want to encourage others to come? How are they encouraging people to come to these spaces? How are they running the show?
Yeah, so basically, they've purchased a massive piece of land in Caniço, and they're starting to develop that. So they'll be building real estate. They're part of something that's called Citadel Garden. So they've got a bunch of locations. I think they've got Croatia. I think there is already like developed. Eco village, something like that over there. And there is, I think, in Georgia, and there's another location, I think, in Canada, where basically they try to build, a similar real estate kind of housing, and basically have people stay there, like specifically for family, or Bitcoiner families stay there, and network, and basically have a good life in a good neighborhood with a good community. So that's the idea.
They sell
I
they sell the properties, do they?
they will be selling, they will be renting. I think there's an element of maybe timeshare there as well. I'm not entirely sure, because the model has somewhat evolved from the last
Okay.
time when I spoke to Sylvia and Rob. But it's an interesting concept, and the really really good and based people who are behind that. So check it out. It's something that actually made me come to Madeira in the first place, because I was
Wow.
here during the Bitcoin Atlantis conference, which was amazing. And I saw that there were actually three stages. So there was a main stage, the dev stage, and the kids stage. And when I
Mm.
saw, the kids interacting and having, debates with Jack Mallers and Jack Mazuko, it's like, oh my God, these kids are going to be so much ahead of, their normie peers. Uh, so I said, like, okay, well, I definitely want my kids to be, like that, to hang around with these guys and ask the right questions, and have their reality on such a beautiful island. So
So, as a father, do you feel like your kids have the opportunity to grow into good men within Madeira?
I think, as a father, first of all, it's a big unknown. You have the risk of, raising up kids. I got two sons, so raising up two sons for the times that are coming, and I just feel that they will be way better off in terms of specifically their mental health. They will have a decent childhood. They won't be confused about who they are. They won't see an awkward creatures walking the streets like they do in let's say UK. It's like Madeira is, as you know it, it's fairly conservative, a little bit I would say a little bit old-fashioned way of living with and raising family, but it's also very good way of raising family. Everything is around family, everything is around community, and I feel that at this point, I'm glad to that my kids don't have to be next to some kids whose parents decided to give their 6 or 7 year olds an iPad and install a bunch of games because they think this is the right way. I prefer the kind of sticks and stones on the beach or in the jungle way of them spending their time, because time for screens will come inevitably anyway. For now, they don't need it. There's no need to compete in anything. If they're competing, they should be competing in sports. They should be competing in arts, and etc. So I'm
You're
quite happy.
happy. You're happy with the environment for them. Well,
Yeah,
that's very encouraging for someone on maybe years before you, like your stage, to be going into a place and being confident that other families are happy with raising their kids there. It's also, especially Bitcoiners, then that's very encouraging.
yeah.
And I'm sure anybody who's hearing this who maybe aspires to have a family might think, okay, well, where is good? Because I feel like a lot of places around the world are tough to know if it's a good spot to have your children. And I think a lot of people are discouraged to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Life, the fiat life, the fiat world has been designed in such way that we don't have kids. Women pursue their careers, and oftentimes, there is not. It's not enough if just the man works and wants to, have a family, have a house, and all. Sometimes it's just basically. Taking away the time and energy of people, and they don't find the time and energy to start a family, or they delay that moment until it's late or too late sometimes. So I do encourage everyone who's kind of considering and wanting to have a family. You don't have to wait too long. Don't worry. There's no such thing as you're too early. If these thoughts already cross your mind, it means you're probably ready. And the fact is that as a future father, you will need to learn the ropes anyway, and there's no way to prepare you for fatherhood
Mm.
until you actually become a
Have
father.
a child,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, no, I've
So it's
heard similar things.
yeah,
That's great.
but you're in a good place. So Madeira is definitely a good place, and the community, as you said, that's a bless. I feel that we've built something special here. Obviously, I know we're doing Bitcoin walks, so we've got our bunch of people who are you meet on regular basis. So we're doing the Bitcoin walks on Saturdays, and we have our meetups on Wednesdays with our bunch of folks. We just meet in local bar. And there's been always, like a routine during the week. So we are well connected. We chat. We plan what's coming up. We celebrate together, and it's fantastic. It's really really great. I feel like I haven't had a community like that for since I was in high school or something like that. So
Wow.
it feels really great. It's really really worth it. Worth trying it out. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, really, really good. Um, looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. We'll be here for another few weeks, and then hopefully by later on in the year, then can spend a little bit more time, and then full time then at the start of next year. But
Amazing.
really, really want to see how we can collaborate with the local initiative, the Bitcoin initiative Free Madeira, to make sure that things are well organized and that the push for Bitcoin adoption continues, because it's always good, and you do need to push. It's not just going to happen itself,
Agreed.
and encourage those who are here who are Bitcoiners to also help out in whatever way and see how people can add in their value.
For sure. Charlie, I want to look back to your title. You put yourself as Bitcoin estate planner,
Mm.
and you told me a thing or two about Shelling Point. Do you want to give us a 2-minute pitch, elevator
Pitch,
pitch?
yeah. Well, I find since we're talking a lot about families, I think it's very relevant. Shelling Point is designated towards families and towards managing their wealth over not only the lifetime of the father or the mother, but also their kids and their kids. Um, I'm reading lot of scripture recently, and there's a big proverb that talks about the good man leaves something for their children's children, and I think that is a big part of what Shelling Point is how do you manage to do that in a way that they can go ahead and live a good life and be good men and women themselves down the line. So the wealth, I've studied a lot about wealth and money specifically, and how maybe money has been tied to evil, or you cannot have you cannot have two masters. You can't have money and let's say God, but you can only have one. So the love of money is the root of evil, let's say. And and I think that the idea of wealth is misunderstood, that we can build wealth, but we can build wealth in a way that it serves others, uh, that it can serve others in a good way. And all families over the course of history have tried to figure out how can they build wealth, so that they can live a decent life and a high quality life, and how can they pass on that wealth onto their next generations. How can they make sure that their kids are in a good stage, and that they don't squander that wealth either, because they don't want their grandchildren to be less well off than they are. So it's not only about being able to pass on the what you've made, what you've earned to your
Mhm.
children, but also be able to pass on the teachings that you learned throughout your life,
The
so that they
legacy.
right, the legacy, but also that your children learn the skills and the ability to do what you have done, and maybe even develop it further, so
Of
that
course.
you can think of, not there's never a finished product, but it's a constantly developing product throughout a generation or a family. And I love the idea of when you look at people's last name, like Smith, or Cobbler, or people's last names were attached to the trade that they did. And I think on a Bitcoin standard, we're going to go back towards more of a gold standard sort of era, where you have families that dedicate themselves towards certain specialist trades, that they dedicate themselves to the society, and your patrimony and your estate is very important to be able to facilitate that service over the course of generations. And I believe Bitcoin is the perfect way to be able to conserve wealth over the course of people's generations, of families' generations. The main reason is because it's absolutely scarce, it's digital, it's portable, it's also, yeah, divisible, which is very important within a family, specifically in inheritance. There's lots of problems with divisibility with estates, with property, etc. And it's also uncensorable. So you obviously, governments love to be able to take a piece of the pie, and inheritance tax is a big thing. So with Bitcoin, obviously, without breaking any laws, to be able to be smart about how you manage your estate as a family, and how to be able to do that in a way that, you know, that your wealth is conserved, let's just say. Okay, so Shelling Point works hand to hand with families so that they can keep their Bitcoin in self custody, so that they can manage their Bitcoin in a way that makes financial sense with regards to their liabilities, so their expenses and their long-term desires of what they want with their families. And how do they communicate Bitcoin to the rest of their family? Because you might be into Bitcoin, you might know a lot about it, but your spouse might not be so uh, familiar with it. You might not be able to communicate certain aspects to it, or your children or your nephews or whoever is will be in charge of your legacy after you pass away. So being able to hold those conversations with your family together, being able to have a space and a third party who's professional, discreet, and, you know, takes the relationship very seriously and takes it as a lifetime relationship rather than just a one single service. So we help families get set up with self custody if they need to, with all the top end tools, open source, high security tools that one needs to, the security, and then also the protocols in order to maintain that Bitcoin accessible by the right people, but also secure enough that the chance of unwanted access or theft is very, the probability is very, very low. So
Yeah.
that's the first and foremost. Just as you said, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, security is the base, and having iron tight security and good privacy techniques is a very important aspect. So that's Shelling Point's base. We take people's information very seriously. We don't ask for unnecessary information from our clients. So, you know, there's nothing that Shelling Point has that is, you know, it's not a honeypot. But we do help them with structuring their security and their Bitcoin in a way that makes total sense. So dividing your capital depending on the purpose of what your state will do in the future. So you might want to save up for your children's wedding. You might want to save for their education. You might want to be able to have something for your retirement. You might want to be able to leave your Bitcoin over for 5 beneficiaries. So how do you structure it in a way that they all attain their amount of Bitcoin without there having to be a lawyer to be in between all of that and have to divide it up? So having a technically sound and rigorous setup, inheritance setup, so that everybody gets their equivalent Bitcoin, and then also to be able to have the right instructions list, have the right number of backups for Bitcoin. So there are a lot of steps that are required and conversations that are needed within a family structure in order for someone to hold Bitcoin in self custody and for that Bitcoin to be able to pass on in the right way. And Shelling Point serves as that special, you know, that's our speciality, and that's what we love to do. And we love to get to know our client. We love to understand them. We love to know what their dreams are and why they're saving in Bitcoin. Because one thing is you're stacking sats. That's great,
Yeah.
but what is it for?
Yeah.
What are you here for doing? You know,
I
and these
think
questions.
I think I'm going to jump in here because it's just I just realized that everybody's somewhere different in their journey down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and I think the way we explain Bitcoin, maybe also to our, like, I found it personally the hardest to explain Bitcoin to my closest ones, to my family, like, they're my parents, my partner, like, it feels like, sometimes I met complete strangers and I have a conversation, and then they tell me, oh my god, that makes sense, you made it so clear to me, I really appreciate it. And I feel like, okay, I did a good work here. I think they might be, getting it, they might be orange pilled. But I struggle, and I wish this was easier for me to do that with my own, close friends and parents. And I think that there is some kind of bias because, like, why do we do that? Because we care, because we want them to also, be saved from the tyranny of the fiat evil world, and we want them to, to preserve their time and energy that they spend at work, and have something that will not melt like an ice cube, 10 years from now. So we are very passionate about that, and we're trying to, maybe a little too much, to kind of
Mm.
say, hey, you gotta be, trust me, bro, it's gonna be fine. And I think that's what you're doing, like, having a professional consulting, business. I'm also trying to do that with people who are open to this kind of coaching. um, and basically, having someone who's coming completely, completely new, completely fresh, and just as you said, listening in the first place, understanding how their life goes, and finding the anchor to something in their life, to maybe then explain how their life could be better because of Bitcoin, and how this, how self custody is a real revolution, is an advantage if you do it, like, if you don't know the person, or you don't know very well the person you're interacting with.
You can't, yeah, you can't be a prophet in your own land, right? That's what a lot of people say, and I
Yeah,
think that applies to your point.
I
So
like that.
it's about growing also the trust, the brand over time, and allowing people to know that this is a trusted brand, a trusted individual, because it is sensitive information. And to be able to open up about these aspects of your family, of your dreams, is a very, you really, you're making yourself vulnerable. So that's why we really aim on being able to take each relationship incredibly seriously, and yeah, try to get down to their level, as you say, find an anchor. What's their perception already of Bitcoin? What's
Yeah,
their relationship with money? What's their relationship with their other siblings, or even with their next of kin? And how do they see the idea of inheritance, right? Because different people think of it in much different ways, and you don't want to be, you know trying to get them to fit into a box that you have, but figure out where they're coming from and see what tools are best for them. So yeah, I'm really encouraged about this service, and I'm learning so much on a day-to-day basis about people and how people think, and how Bitcoin can serve families in more and more ways, which is just an amazing, it's an amazing experience. So
yeah.
yeah, so anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more, we do a strategy session, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and maybe we have a talk and see, is it something that could benefit you? And if so, then we can talk about that. So if anybody wants to reach out, hit me up.
Amazing. Charlie, what's the best place to find you?
So yeah, on all, pretty much all socials, including Noster. So you could, I don't know if you can place it down on the captions below, but the Natural Investor is my name on, like, let's say Instagram, but on X it's at Invest by Christ. And then you have on all socials Shelling Point. So whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's X, whether that's um, Noster, any of these socials, you can find us on Shelling Point.
Shining Point.
And yeah, Shelling Point. Just put in Shelling Point, or Shelling P21. But yeah, also, I'm very contactable on the website. So schellingpoint.xyz. If you go in there, then you can reach out to me really easily if you have any questions.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, Cool, Charlie. One last thing. Obviously, you've come to the Bitcoin Walk in Ashada Grande in Madeira last Friday.
Mm.
So you met our community, our walking community, at least part of it. And I wanted to kind of pick your brains on your experience and get your feedback, so that other people may also find some inspiration in that.
Well, if first of all, get on to Endo as well. If you want to start a Bitcoin walk, I think Endo has a really good framework for running a Bitcoin walk, and join that community, because it's a big community that already exists worldwide. My experience was, well, to be able to have a community that you can just plug into and open up to, and immediately find such similar values and good conversations with people, is is so refreshing. I already feel like I've been here for a very long time in Madeira just because of the community that exists. And I really appreciate you, Endo, for introducing me to people and getting, opening the doors for me and for everybody else that was there, and it's families and it's peoples from all walks of life, excuse the pun. And we are walking in the most beautiful areas possible. We also got to meet another family that was growing a huge variety of vegetables and fruits in a way that is very natural. A big expert in permaculture.
Permaculture, yeah.
And everyone takes their privacy seriously. Everyone understands the tools that they need. Everyone's open-minded, and there's no judgment, no matter who you are. So yeah, I'm highly encourage anyone who comes to Madeira to do the Bitcoin walk, or if you're in your own place and you're looking to be able to start a meetup or do something. Endo found it just like that. Start a Bitcoin walk, reach out to Endo, because this is yeah, it's the way to do it. Best way to talk is while you're walking, right?
It's a very inclusive format. There is no barriers of entry. Don't worry. You're like, if you're new to Bitcoin, you don't have to stress about it. It's very, another pun, easygoing. And basically, you get to meet other Bitcoiners, and maybe ask some questions, or maybe listen to other people have conversations and what they talk about. And I keep on repeating that because I'm not super smart. I'm not an expert, but I learned tons, and I feel blessed that I was exposed to those conversations that people smarter than myself were having with me next to them, and being able to listen and see them question things and see them navigate through this was very reassuring. Because if you're into Bitcoin and you follow the mainstream media narrative, or you just you go on Bitcoin Twitter, or YouTube, and
Mhm.
tap into the lots of hype over there. You'll find anything you want to find. And actually, those in real life connections, I find them super useful because they kind of validate. They you have a person walking next to you, and you can talk. You can immediately connect with them and find some anchoring points, some common points that you have in common.
Right,
Um,
and it's much more grounded as well. As you say, on social media, most people come into Bitcoin online, and everything you see online is usually, as you say, it's hype, or it has to be something that
yeah.
sticks out. So you're getting, I feel like you're viewing a very skewed form of perception of Bitcoin. But when you meet real Bitcoiners, there's a much more balanced view and real from their perspective, and it's much more relatable, as you're saying, Endo. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. That yeah, come to Madeira, come join it with us. It's going to be great. But you don't have to come to Madeira to build your community. In fact, what I'm like my the Bitcoin Walks mission number one is to build global communities, local communities globally. So wherever you are, there's a place for you, to go for a walk. Get some friends, get some people who are also interested in Bitcoin, or maybe are just willing to come along and have a conversation, and then magic will start to unfold and happen. If you do that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, I can guarantee that you will build relations and friendships with people living in your neighborhood who also understand Bitcoin, with whom you might be able to trade and do some transactions, love. And we're going to need that because, with the digital currencies like digital euro or any kind of CBDC rolling into our lives, um, we want to be able to preserve freedom. Just like, Bitcoiners love cash. So we want this to be a free money. We want to operate in a way that no government can say, hey, this month you've used too much money for fuel or for beef or
Mm.
for travel, whatever. So Bitcoin is an alternative to cash. It's digital. It cannot be stopped by any government, any regulation. So all this Mika, DAC aids, the travel rule, any sort of framework and paperwork that is produced in Brussels. and imposed onto the European Union. Nice. Yeah. Okay. We've got some paperwork that's supposed to regulate the business, but it doesn't affect Bitcoin anyhow. Bitcoin works like water in a waterfall. It doesn't care. It keeps on going. And it's good to learn those tools. It's good to understand the advantages of them. It's good to understand the risks as well,
Mm.
because with great responsibility, with great powers come great responsibility. So you gotta learn the ropes here. But as I say, most of us can drive a car, and we had to go through a training, the driving lessons to get there to operate a complicated machine. If you can do that, you can probably learn how to use Bitcoin in a safe manner as well. So it's accessible. It's not the black magic. You don't have to be technical. You just have to have a little bit of common sense and eagerness to learn a thing or two, and then
Yeah,
it will all settle in.
yeah, and to know the benefits of knowing how to manage it, right? And the you know the you feel much more sovereign, and you feel like you have more control over your own life once you can use Bitcoin properly.
Absolutely. And we are in beautiful Madeira, safe place. But there are countries where people were in a situation that they had to change their life overnight. Be it Ukraine, be it Iran. If something happens, all of a sudden your currency starts to lose value. There is an outbreak of war. You have to move somewhere. Um, at this point, it is very likely that the third parties holding your money, like your bank or your any institutions in between, may just say, "Hey, sorry, there's a limit. You cannot touch more than the ever whatever amount they decide is or should be available to you." With Bitcoin, this is not the case. You're in control. You can literally, pack your bag, get to another country with all your wealth. If you remember it, you can do it in your head. You don't even need a backup. I mean, I do encourage people to take a backup, but that's what I'm simplifying the story here. It's something that nobody can take away from you, and that's the real revolution, right? Um, and yeah, I think it's in today's crazy times, where the hegemon, the United States, is kind of on the decline, and they've peaked with their dominance in the world, like many other nations did before. Before the US dollar, we had British pound as a global reserve. Before that, we had a franc, French franc, and then also
The
money
Dutch
from
builder, the
the
Spanish pound.
guilder. That's right, and Portugal as well at some point, right? I think Portugal might have been one of the first, actually.
Yeah,
So they raise, they have their peak, and then they fall down, and dollar is falling down, dollar is declining as the global reserve currency, and this time, first time in the human history, we've got an alternative that is not going to be another nation state currency. So I don't think the world will adopt Chinese yuan as a global reserve. I don't think the world trusts China, the Communist Party of China, to impose the money for the whole world. And I think that Bitcoin is going to take this place and take this role at some point as a neutral asset that can be mined by anybody around the world with no discrimination to your geography or religious beliefs or ethnicity, whatever.
just
Um,
access to electricity, and this is these markets, these Bitcoin walks, these communities are the focal point of this new emerging money that will occur. So, as you say, Endo, if you are interested in doing Bitcoin Walk, if you're interested in setting up your own community or meetup, this is what will enable the new monetary revolution, which stops people from having to suffer so much from inflation and from theft that occurs day in day out, right?
Absolutely. We've talked about El Salvador and how the foundation of any sort of transformation was the security. I think the next on that
Pyramid.
pyramid of needs is basically having the ability to transact and to build wealth, using the money that is stable, that is doesn't lose its value, that cannot be confiscated. We've probably all heard about cases of Zimbabwe, and the notes with 1 trillion Zimbabwean dollars,
Mm.
where the inflation is basically skyrocketing into hundreds and thousands of percent. And this is we're kind of privileged because we live in the Western Hemisphere where things are relatively stable for now. And we just have to realize that it's not always going to be pretty. It hasn't always been pretty. And there are countries where bank runs were happening not so long ago, even in Cyprus or Lebanon, the last examples. So Bitcoin is a tool that allows you to preserve your time and energy and your sovereignty over whatever wealth you can build. So having those, learning those technologies and having a community with whom you can transact, with whom you can build together, and create infrastructure. I think it's a really focal point, and I really believe that right now it is our responsibility to keep pushing with the Bitcoin community's development, to have as many people in each city around the world to understand Bitcoin. We're still very early. People think that Bitcoin might be too late, or Bitcoin is dead. That's just ignorance talking. I think that everybody should be looking into that and should learn how to use it. I never say that you have to put any like all your wealth and all your money into Bitcoin, but I encourage my friends and my relatives to learn how to use this technology, to learn how
Right.
to make your first Bitcoin transaction, how to make a backup of your wallet, how to maybe restore your wallet. Those are the crucial things and activities that you need to be familiar with, so that at the moments of distress, you don't have to stress that much. You don't have you're much more confident. You don't make mistakes because you've done that before, and you don't have to learn the ropes on a situation that is already quite stressful. um, Cool. That's pretty much what I have to say. Charlie, we're almost coming to an hour. I want to kind of give it back to you to say, like, last closing words. What do you wish people do, and how they build their communities, interact with Bitcoin? Should people spend their Bitcoin at this time of the cycle?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It's a beautiful thing to use, especially if you can tell the person that you are giving Bitcoin to, you know that you're giving them something that's really, really valuable, really scarce, something
Yeah.
that is pure, something that is unalterable, something that will not be modified by any other individual. And that transaction, that exchange that you have with that other individual is pure and it's good, and it's much different than if you're using a debaseable, obscure, you know, filled with lies and theft medium of exchange. That there's a big contrast, and I think doing it will bring good into your life as well, because you're doing good to that other person when you're giving them Bitcoin. So I highly suggest it. Um, I remember being in London, and with your friends, you might go out for dinners, or you might go for drinks, or you might have to pay he might pay for rent, and then you pay him part of it or whatever, years ago. But Bitcoin was at a low at the time. It was at around 20K, and every debt that I had with that friend of mine was all in Bitcoin, and he always held it within a wallet. And years later, he came back from Sydney, and we met in El Salvador, and he still has that same wallet with the same Bitcoin. And we went back to when all those transactions were done and what he has, and it's many multiples of what it was. And that it gives a good feeling to the person, that you've been doing it. And for me, well, all my savings was in Bitcoin anyway, so that's for me. I was happy to always do that. So yeah, I highly suggest it. Get involved with your friends and family, get them included, get a meetup going, reach out to other Bitcoiners out there, try and help them out, and integrate it into your life. And yeah, get your estate sorted out as well. You know, I know I'm biased, but do, because it encourages you to then save a higher proportion and allows you to think more long term about why you're on this planet, what you're saving for, and how Bitcoin can serve you and your future generations. So that's it, guys. Endo, thank you very much. Thank you very much for letting me be on this.
Such a pleasure. Such a
Yeah.
pleasure, Charlie. I'm sure we'll meet again quite soon.
Yeah. All
Awesome.
right. Well,
let's wrap it up here, and yeah, we'll follow up. I'll try to tag you on the post so people can find you easily as well on X, and
okay, sweet.
follow up from there. Charlie, thanks so much. Have a great day.
All the best.